Come to order. Senator from Maryland.
Mr. President, I come to the floor today to say goodbye, as difficult as this may be. Marylanders have trusted me to represent them for 20 years in the Maryland General Assembly, 8 years as Speaker of the House, 20 years in the House of Representatives, and 18 years in the United States Senate, including now chairing the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Let me start by thanking Marylanders for giving me your trust to represent you in this august body. You have supported me in 18 elections. The Hebrew letter for 18 is chai, which also means life. 58 years of my life. My grandparents came to this country over 100 years ago to escape the pogroms of Europe, and they settled in Baltimore and built a life for their family. Their grandson now serves in the United States Senate. This is a great country. Marylanders have allowed me to pursue my ambition of public service to help others whose voices and needs are often ignored in the halls of power. In my family, I was taught from a young age that it's our responsibility to make the world a better place, to kun olam, repair the world, and help those who are less fortunate and are in need, tzedakah, charity. These principles were demonstrated to me by the communal activities of my parents. These principles, these values, have been my North Star that have guided my public service as a legislator. Of course, the work of a legislator is not always easy. It requires perseverance, patience, a sense of humor, and optimism that can make the world a better place, even in the face of often horrible, seemingly insurmountable challenges. But as I look back at my time here, it's the hardest battles that were some of the most rewarding. Each one reflects the values I cherish and collective will to help make the world around us and our communities a better place to live. On the Senate Finance Committee, I've had a front seat advancing health policy. I was fortunate to serve with the champion of health care, Senator Ted Kennedy. He was a mentor to me as the steps we can take so all Americans have access to affordable, quality health care. Health care should be a right for everyone in this country and not a privilege only for those who can afford it. I was proud to be part of the Congress that passed the Affordable Care Act. That law included my legislation that elevated the National Institute for Minority Health and Health Disparities at NIH. As much progress this has brought, the struggle for health care equality continues. Today, Medicare coverage includes legislation I authored for screening and preventive care, saving lives and dollars. And all health insurance now covers pediatric dental care, which was legislation I authored after the tragic death of DeMonte Driver, a 12-year-old in Maryland whose life could have been saved with a simple tooth extraction. I partnered with Senator Rob Portman in both the House and in the Senate to expand retirement security, particularly for lower-wage workers. Thanks to legislation we co-authored and has been enacted into law, more employers are providing opportunities for their employees to participate in retirement plans. Our legislation included a saver's credit for lower-wage workers and automatic enrollment provisions that have dramatically increased participation by employees. In the last 10 years, participation in retirement savings for the lowest income quintile of Americans has increased by 135%. And in affordable housing and economic development in underserved communities, I've worked with Senator Cantwell on improvements to the low-income housing tax credit. I've authored successful legislation to expand the new market tax credits and historic tax credits, which have been used for economic development and affordable housing opportunities across Maryland and our nation. Examples of the use of these tools in Maryland include the Justice Thurgood Marshall Center in Baltimore, the Natty Bow Building in Baltimore, the Wally Bates Legacy Center in Annapolis, and yes, just yesterday, Senator Van Hollen and I were at the Southern Stream Health and Wellness Center that used new market tax credits with Bishop Hickman, which is energizing and revitalizing the communities in East Baltimore. On the Environment and Public Works Committee, I've had the opportunity to expand the federal government's commitment to our infrastructure. The recently enacted bipartisan infrastructure law included many of my priorities. For example, it included funding for reconnecting communities that have been divided and disadvantaged through ill-conceived transportation projects. The poster child for this initiative is the Franklin-Mulberry Corridor in Baltimore. It was not surprising that Baltimore received funding in the first round of federal grants. I'm equally proud of the expansion of the Transportation Alternative Program, TAP. I was the author of the TAP program that allows governments to make their own priority decisions on the use of part of the federal highway funds. That has been a favorite source of funds to provide trails for local communities that connect neighborhoods for walkers and bikers, including, for example, the rehabilitation of the C&O towpath in Washington, Frederick, and Montgomery counties. Myrna and I take advantage of these paths to absorb the beauty of our communities that are now connected through paths and trails. Older communities still have lead pipes bringing drinking water into their homes, and schools threatening the health of our children. The bipartisan infrastructure law provides significant help to eliminate this public health threat, including $82 million in federal grants for Maryland. It also provides unprecedented increases in transit funding, a priority of mine, which is particularly important to traditionally underserved and underrepresented communities. This law allows Maryland to move forward again with the Transit Red Line in Baltimore. Funding for Amtrak enabled Baltimore to begin construction of the Frederick Douglass Tunnel to expedite travel along the Northeast Corridor. One of my top priorities as a Maryland senator has been to promote the health of the Chesapeake Bay, and the federal partnership has been essential in this cause. The Bay is a national treasure, the largest estuary in our hemisphere, and iconic to Maryland. It is in our DNA, particularly important to our economy and our way of life. I first started fighting for the Bay in the Maryland General Assembly. When I was Speaker of the House, I partnered with Governor Harry Hughes to establish the multi-state effort to save the Bay. It led to the partnership with 6 states and the District of Columbia and the Federal Bay Program. Maryland senators have taken the federal lead, starting with Senator Mac Mathias, then Senator Paul Sarbanes and Barbara Mikulski, and now Senator Chris Van Hollen and myself. During my years in the Senate, I've worked with my colleagues to increase funds for the Bay, including the EPA, NOAA, Army Corps of Engineers, wastewater treatment funds, watershed grant funds, agricultural land preservation funds, oyster restoration funds, removal of invasive species from nutria to the blue catfish, and many, many more. I particularly want to note with pride funding for Poplar and Mid-Bay, location for dredging disposals that have been used for environmental restoration and non-controversial locations necessary to keep our channels commercially competitive. Our work on the Chesapeake Bay is working, and it's become a global model of multi-jurisdictional cooperation. The Environment and Public Works Committee helps each region of our country that suffers from a catastrophic event that destroys infrastructure. I thank the leadership of the committee for reaching out to Maryland after the tragic loss of the Francis Scott Key Bridge. The Biden administration has been there every step of the way to help Maryland, and I am confident that Congress will provide the resources and authority to move forward on the construction of the new bridge as quickly as possible. I've been both the chair and ranking member on the Small Business and Entrepreneurship Committee. I am so proud of the bipartisan work of the committee, working with Senator Rubio, particularly during COVID. The historic relief packages we designed not only saved many small businesses, but truly helped to save our economy during the pandemic. I am particularly proud of the focus I brought to help traditionally underserved communities. Senator Warner and I worked to provide support for the CDFIs, so financing options were available in underbanked communities, including nonprofits and returning citizens in the program, once again provided help and services to often forgotten neighborhoods. During my chairmanship, Maryland expanded from 1 to 4 women's business centers. 2 are located at HBCUs. In addition, Maryland opened its first Veterans Business Outreach Center. Because of these programs, small businesses are thriving in Maryland, especially those led by women, particularly women of color. My service in Congress built on my record of inclusion started with my service in the Maryland General Assembly. As a Baltimore City legislator, I fought for equalization of state educational funds to favor poor property wealth jurisdictions such as Baltimore City. I helped develop the Maryland Hospital all-payer rate system for equal health care access regardless of economic circumstances. Under this system, Maryland has avoided having charity hospitals. As a member of the House of Representatives in the United States Senate, I have helped preserve and strengthen the Maryland hospital rate system. I was the leader in the state of Maryland for the development of the circuit breaker property tax credit program that allows seniors to remain in their homes. And as Speaker of the House, I appointed the first woman, the first African American, to chair a standing committee. One of my proudest accomplishments as a legislator came in the United States Senate. It was the passage and enactment of the Sergei Magnitsky Rule of Law Accountability Act. This law was inspired by the death of Sergei Magnitsky, a Russian tax attorney who was murdered 15 years ago last month for uncovering corruption. His story has been told to the world by his client, Bill Browder, and came to my attention as the chair of the Helsinki Commission. When I was first elected to Congress in 1987, my family was deeply involved in the cause of getting Soviet Jews out of the Soviet Union. My wife, Myrna, was leader of the Maryland Committee for Soviet Jewry. My close friend, Representative Steny Hoyer, chaired the U.S. Helsinki Commission that took up the cause of Soviet Jews and gave me the opportunity to become involved. Steny and I traveled together to several countries behind the Iron Curtain to give hope to those who were living in countries where their leaders denied their citizens basic human rights. So when Sergei Magnitsky was killed, it was clear to me that those who violated his basic rights needed to be held accountable, even if the Russian government refused to act. The Sergei Magnitsky Rule of Law Accountability Act targeted those individuals who were complicit in his jailing and murder. It blocked these individuals from enjoying the benefits of America, from traveling to our country or using our banking system. It put their reputation, ability to travel, and access to their assets at risk. These policies were influenced by Senator Scoop Jackson's legislation, the Jackson-Vanik Law, that denied trade privileges to countries that blocked their citizens from emigrating. When Jackson-Vanik was repealed, because its purpose had been accomplished, it was appropriate that that legislation was used as the vehicle to replace Jackson-Vanik with Magnitsky. The original Magnitsky law focused on human rights abuses in Russia. And in 2016, I authored the Global Magnitsky Human Rights Accountability Act, which expanded the legislation around the world. These laws have given birth to a whole new international legal framework for upholding human rights and deterring corrupt actors. The European Union and other governments around the world have replicated the Magnitsky system. As of this year, the U.S. program has sanctioned more than 650 foreign persons and entities. But I have to underline a really important point. These laws were not easy to pass. The pushback from Russia alone was historic and continues to this day. But it was the bipartisan support that allowed these bills to make it through the process. I want to acknowledge Senator Dick Lugar, John McCain, and Roger Wicker, my partners in getting the Magnitsky laws enacted. As a result, they have not only been enacted, but they have been very effective. Despite setbacks and opposition, we never gave up hope. And today, corrupt leaders fear the Magnitsky sanctions. The safety of human rights defenders have benefited from these laws. Over and over again, my work as a legislator, I've seen the importance of never giving up. Across my years in Congress, I've seen what I thought would be a dream come true. I've seen the Soviet Jews liberated from the former Soviet Union, the Berlin Wall torn down, former communist-controlled countries now NATO allies, and political prisoners released to freedom. It's great to see my friend, Vladimir Kara-Murza, free from being imprisoned in Russia. As Václav Havel, the reform leader of the Czech Republic, said, "There's only one thing I will not concede, that it might be meaningless to strive in a good cause." Each of us can make a difference. Never give up hope. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Everybody can be great because everybody can serve." As my friend and classmate in the House of Representatives, along with my classmate Kwesi Mfume, Representative John Lewis said, we should all be willing to get into good trouble. And as that famous philosopher from Baltimore, Babe Ruth, stated, never let the fear of striking out keep you from playing the game. I often speak about the need for a value-based approach to policymaking. This has rung true in healthcare and the environment, promoting a dignified retirement and creating economic opportunities for all. Perhaps nowhere has this been more fundamental than when it comes to foreign policy and national security. President Biden got it right when he spoke about our international engagement. He said, "We must start with diplomacy rooted in Americans' most cherished democratic values, defending freedom, championing opportunity, upholding universal rights, respecting the rule of law, and treating every person with dignity." As chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, I've made promoting value-based foreign policy decisions a top priority. In addition to the Magnitsky Act, I'm especially proud of my work with Senator Todd Young on combating global corruption that was enacted in 2023. That legislation requires each of our embassies around the world to evaluate how effective the country in which our embassy is located is fighting corruption. The model used for this legislation is similar to the trafficking in persons tier rankings and reports, with consequences against countries that are not making acceptable progress to improve their rankings against human trafficking. Leading globally against human trafficking and corruption is an American value-based foreign policy at its finest. America's strength is in our values. We need to lead globally with our strength. My ability to promote legislation and policies that uphold core universal values was made possible because of my incredible partners, because of their deep values and commitment. There is no way I could have achieved what I've been able to achieve if it weren't for my incredible staff. Their loyalty, their dedication to public service, and their talent made the Cardin team. In 38 years in Congress, I've only had two chiefs, Dave Gashgarian and Chris Lynch. Both led by example and recruited the very best to public service. For over 25 years, Debbie Yamada has attempted to manage the impossible, me. Mr. President, I ask consent that I incorporate in the record a complete list of the staff that I've been blessed to have during my terms in the United States Senate. Our staff works long hours for less compensation than many of them could make in the private sector because of their commitment to public service. To my staff, you have made Team Cardin a championship team. I also want to salute the people who make this institution work. My heartfelt thanks to the floor staff, committee staff, security staff, and all those who work behind the scenes to make the Senate work. I recognize and salute your dedication. As I said in the beginning, I don't want to say goodbye. This is especially true of my colleagues, my Senate family, and you are family. These past 18 years has been the honor of my life. You have my undying gratitude for partnering with me to serve our country. I started in the Senate in 2007 with a class of 10 new senators. Senator Webb, McCaskill, and Corker are no longer in the Senate. I regret that Senators Tester, Brown, and Casey will be leaving with me at the end of this term. To the remaining three, Senator Klobuchar, Sanders, and Whitehouse, we count on you to carry on our class traditions. I was blessed to have two seatmates during my 18 years in the Senate who are trusted friends. Senator Barbara Mikulski, who welcomed me to the Senate and made my transition so productive, and Senator Chris Van Hollen and I have worked in unity for the people of Maryland. I know that he will continue to serve the people well as the senior senator along with newly elected Angela Osserbrooks. But the partners that made public service possible for me are my family. Myrna and I met in elementary school. And last month, we celebrated our 60th wedding anniversary. Amazing that she's put up with all those years. She's my strongest supporter. I could not have had the career that I had without her unconditional support and confidence. Myrna shares my commitment of giving back to the community, and she keeps me properly grounded. When I became Speaker of the House, she sent me a card to remind me of this. The card read, "To the rest of the world, you may be a roaring lion, but in this house, you're just a pussycat." I put that card on my desk in Annapolis as a constant reminder. My son of blessed memory and my daughter Deborah supported my public career, never complaining about the family sacrifices they had to make, and I know there were many. Finally, some parting advice. I know that many people across this country and around the world are concerned about the direction of the United States. But I'm optimistic we will get through these challenges. Now, some people might say, optimistic. How can that be? They read the news and say, what about our justice system? What about the rule of law? What about our democracy? What about the threats, autocracies around the world and here at home? What about the resurgence of corrupt, blatantly transactional politics? I recognize these threats, and I'm not naive to the dangers and challenges as we all look ahead. There are many challenges ahead of us, but we must not give up hope. The Senate, this body of 100 members in a nation of 335 million Americans, sustains my hope. With a 6-year term representing constituents across the entire state, you have the time and resources to engage each other. We have the time to constructively work across the aisle to find areas of common agreement. There's no institution like this in the world. It's a great honor to be a senator, but it comes with responsibilities to debate and vote on important issues of our times. Over the last 18 years, I've seen firsthand how the Senate works best when we work together. I cited many of these examples, the successful efforts to do just that, working across the aisle on pension reform, small business COVID relief, advancing value-based foreign policy, and many more. We don't have to agree on every single issue, and we never will. But when we defend the constitutional powers of this institution and the prerogatives of the legislative branch together, we create positive results for the country. The Senate is where the rubber meets the road. It's the dividing line between democracy and autocracy. To my colleagues in the Senate, you play an important role in our democratic check and balance system. Never has it been more important for us to fight to protect our democracy, to defend the rule of law, and to stand up for our common values. As senators, we need to demonstrate to the American public by your actions that you can practice civility, that differences can be resolved constructively without harsh terms. We need to remember that compromise was how this nation was formed. It can be a good thing and bring people together. Compromise on policy, but never on principles or values. Treat people with respect even when you disagree. I've made that the guiding principle in my office. My staff calls it Cardin-esque. Finally, let us all make it a priority to promote better knowledge and understanding of history, civic engagement, and again, civility. Whether promoting American values or investing in domestic priorities here at home, I ask you to let your values guide you to lead our world and our community in a better place, a fairer place, a healthier place, a more peaceful place, a more prosperous place for all to benefit. Let that be our North Star. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.